Good morning and welcome to Practice Community webinar for the National Adaptation Plans for Latin America. My name is Lily Leva and I will be the moderator of the webinar. First, I would like to ask you if you can hear me well. Can you hear me well? Please write on the chat if so, or if you have any problems. Great. First, I will give you some indications for the people who haven't used this platform before. This platform allows us to listen to the webinar whether in English or in Spanish. So in order to choose the language, on the bottom right hand corner of the screen where it says English, your language, English, Spanish, you can choose the language you want to listen the webinar to. If you have any technical problem, please click on the question mark located on the bottom left hand of the screen. If the screen freezes or the audio cuts, please refresh your browser. With that, I would like to start welcoming you to our webinar. First, I will give you a word from the Practice Community for National Adaptation Plans for Climate Change. This is a UN Environment initiative through the Regatta program implemented in collaboration with Practical Action. The PNAC community offers the officers, researchers, and specialists of the international cooperation and leaders of social society involved in the elaboration of national adaptation plans of Latin America and the Caribbean to the opportunity to support each other throughout exchange of good practices and challenges. Our webinar is part of the activities of the practice community PNAC, and today's webinar will be about on the role of the private sector, the role of private sector in the financing adaptation with a perspective from national adaptation plans for climate change. That we will present a broad view of plans and opportunities of synergy with the private sector in order to address this challenge. We'll present a case study of Colombia, where we see the benefits of integrating private sector in the rural development and planification for adaptation. For today's webinar, we have the honor to present to you 3 speakers. We will start with a brief introduction on the role of the private sector in the financing adaptation, presented by Jacinto Buenfil, Microfinance for Ecosystem-Based Adaptation Project Coordinator, MIBA, Regional Office for Latin America and the Caribbean of UN Environment. A second presentation will be on adaptation to climate change, the final gap, will be shared by Daniel Puig, Senior Advisor of the Business Engineering Department of UN Environment Technical University of Denmark. And the case of studies of Colombia microfinance to boost rural development will be done by Mauricio Osorio Sanchez, General Manager of IMF Crescamos from Colombia. It is a pleasure to welcome Jacinto Buenfil. I'll give the floor to Jacinto Buenfil. Just a minute for him to log in. Welcome, Jacinto. Good morning. Thank you very much for the introduction. I hope you can all hear me well. Basically, I'm here to give you brief words introducing this topic on the challenges and the need to have the private sectors participating in the financing adaptation. As I mentioned, my name is Jacinto Buenfil. I work for UN Environment, coordinating a project called MIBA, Microfinance for Adaptation-Based Ecosystems. And here we will give a brief, concrete example of through Mr. Osorio about Osorio, and we will give you some different examples of success for adaptation. So, just to start, I will be really brief in these two initial slides, since Daniel Puig will go into much detail regarding this topic. What I wanted to say is that we did and studied through UN Environment in combination with the TU in order to estimate those needs, those adaptation needs, how much that would cost for us, it would cost for us to adapt to climate change. Maybe the key messages on this topic is, first, is that it's easier, unless it's quite complex, it is easier to do the follow-up to public investments of international cooperation that we have on climate change, especially on adaptation. We do not know much on the participation of the private sector. It is also important to highlight that there is a great gap, a financing gap, and we will see some examples in the other slides, and that gap will increase in the future. Therefore, countries won't have enough resources in order to satisfy the needs of the population at the public governmental level, so it is essential the participation of private sector. Basically, private sector is not that involved in adaptation plans, and unlike mitigation, and it is not always seen as a business. There is no easy way to do business in adaptation, and many times that removes the encouragement from the private sector to invest in this type of activities. So we need to find concrete example, sustainable structures, business structures to allow income for the private sector, but also to help in adaptation. We also need to have a capacity to give some follow-up to those investments through robust structures that will monitor this type of activities. And we also require active participation of all sectors, and as for mitigation and adaptation. This slide, Daniel will talk about this, but this slide shows, as I mentioned before, that from the moment we start to measure that gap, the financing gap, what is lacking in the financing aspect, in order for us to satisfy all the needs, financing needs, we can see that there is a gap, and that in the future it will increase. As I mentioned, we are trying to prove some models, some structures that would allow to have a better participation of the private sector in adaptation structures, and that is what we are going to talk about today. And I will give you a brief, a general overview of the MENA project, and then Mauricio will share with you some more details as well as the things that they are doing. The MIBA project, Microfinances for Adaptation-Based Ecosystem, it's one of the first projects that focused on preservation, environmental preservation and adaptation, climate change, and participation of private sector. What we were doing is to work with 5 entities of microfinancing. One of them is an organization called Crezcamos from Colombia, and we have 3 entities in Colombia and 2 in Peru. We work with them developing capacities in order to promote microcredits that are sustainable, of sustainable adaptation options for climate change. Meaning that how, through microcredits, a small producer, let's say in Colombia or Peru, can invest in a process to adaptation to climate change, considering sustainability, environmental sustainability criteria, concepts. We promote measures like efficient risk or the use of solar dehydration, or the better management of nutrients, plagues, soils, the use of organic compost, the better options of ecological different other practices that could be promoted through microfinancing, meaning loans between 1,000 and 1,500, for example. So we're strengthening the capacities, developing the capacities, assessing the risks, improving the tools available to share information on climate change, on adaptation, on sustainable adaptation with the customers, how to create alliances with technical entities in order to establish some centers so that small producers can go through those centers, maybe they get interested in some of the options there and have the financial entity helping them with a credit, and in that way to increase this type of demand of type of services. But we also work with public entities to promote the adaptation-based ecosystem, to promote the microfinancing sector as a strategic ally in the boosting of adaptation to climate change, and to attract more financing, private finances towards sustainable adaptation, especially the development of lines of credit for this, so the microfinances entities could access these options, and we can give more better options to the producers. It's an initiative encouraged by Germany, and we applied. We put into work with other different actors. Why did we choose this approach? It is one of the projects that try to support the ecosystem, the productive aspect, and to get it involved with the commercial and financing situations. So from this point of view, this is type of structures that we have to build with the adaptation plans in order to share that there are ways to do a better business through this type of adaptation systems, and in particular in the financial sector, so we can show that through multiple actions, small-scale actions such as investments, not big investments, could have a really strong impact in small producers and environment. So with multiple solutions of small scales, we can obtain a big scale change, so that entities could be more resilient. We have to have a portfolio of clients that is investing in adaptation processes, and the client invests in this adaptation process and sustainable. It improves the capacities, improves the quality of life, and at the same time it is a less risk client. So this type of scheme could be duplicated in different contexts, and the idea is to have some examples, clear examples, show visible examples how we can involve the private sector in adaptation process. So this is a way to support governments to make them hit the ground in the territory, so that it won't stay at the planification level. So we could have concrete actions and say, you have this you have this quantity, this quantity of producers, and they're willing to do this. You have these actions. We did these actions implemented through this microfinancing structure scheme. So the project was financed through the entities around 9,000 credits, which represents 12 million of private investment and for sustainable development. And finally, this slide tries to show the great market that exists, the great potential that there is, at least in Peru, Colombia, Latin America, considering that we have 9,000 credited, $12 million, more or less invested to this date. All this investment of microfinances with their own resources and financing. There was an engagement at a million term of almost 25,000 credits at around $19 million. But if you consider the portfolio that they have, it's a quite wide portfolio, around $115 million. There's some previous data, outdated data, but we can see the great potential there. So if we start to invest in sustainable development measures, we can arrive with these entities around to a lot million dollars. And if we think about Colombia, we're thinking about $4,000 million, around $4 million, and we go to the other area, almost $14 million. So that is data from 2012, 14. That means that a sector that is sub-help, sub-service of different entities that does not have financing that requires essential participation in the private sector to support this, from the actors that affect directly to this to the ecosystem, and that is essential in order to start this project. So I will leave it there as a whole potential, existing potential for this participation, and we will wait for the other expositions done by Daniel regarding the gap, and the Mauricio regarding the specific details on the rural development in Colombia. And with that, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Jacinto, for this introduction to microfinances, and thank you for stressing the approach based on ecosystems and how the private sector can be a part of this initiative. For all participants, I would like to tell you that at the end of the 3 presentations, we will have a question and answer session. So we will take notes of your questions so we can answer them after the presentations. Now, I would like to welcome our second presenter, Daniel Puig, Senior Advisor of the Senior Assessor of the Department of Microengineering of UN Environment. He will talk about different approaches and researches mentioned by Jacinto regarding the financing gap for adaptation to climate change. You have the floor. Thank you. Thank you, Lily. Thank you, my peer from Regatta, for the invitation. I hope you can hear me well. I think I don't have to introduce myself because Lily told a little bit who I am. I would like to tell you that I just work with the Collaborative Center of UN Environment. We specialize in clean energy, climate change, and sustainable development. And basically, we're a 3-party entity with And we work with Denmark and with UN Environment and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from Denmark, and they help us. They help us and other donors with their projects for climate change. I was asked to present the Adaptation Finance Gap report. The report was published in 2016 as a follow-up of a more generic report published 1.5 years before. So this report of 2016 analyzes the gap. What do we need in order to adapt to climate change in terms of financing, and what are the amounts that we have available now? What we didn't do new calculations. What we did was to synthesize the scientific literature and present it in non-technical budgets terms, for which the scientific literature is too abundant, and maybe for some of you is not that well. And the idea was to disseminate this and synthesize, analyze, synthesize, and disseminate these concepts. It seemed to me we were supposed to talk about this before. He presented this same slide, but in different orientation. It's the same graphic. And what it shows in billion American dollars, what it shows to top left bars show the cost images. I don't know if it's green or blue, depending on the screen. That is the estimated cost of adaptation today. And 22.5 are the bilateral funds of multilateral help that we use now. And with this first approach, we can say that there is a gap, and it's a factor among 2 and 3, so it's a great gap. So if we go to 2030, we see that the ranges are huge, and I will explain I will say, and will mention why. What we can see here is around 340 and 540. The cost, if we say this 22.5, it's a great gap, 6 to 13 times higher. And in the middle we put 50. 50 comes from the half of 100, and that 100 comes from the engagement that we put on the table to offer $100 million for financing climate change. We decided arbitrarily that of that amount, we didn't decide what is the amount for mitigation, what is the amount for adaptation, but arbitrarily we decided, we said that 50 could go to adaptation, so the gap will continue to be important. If we go to 2050, that is greater. I don't see it here because it's not allowed by my screen, but we see the 22.5, the 50, and the ranges are huge. So that would be the quite raw summary of the information given by the report. We have to explain this. We don't have to take it literally either way. And this slide shows a visual way as to the way we know the amount of information that we have regarding financing. We know that bilateral and multilateral financing represents 22.5. We do not know what is the public money that stays in the countries, what is the Peruvian money that stays in Peru for adaptation, climate change projects here in Peru. And that is a problem because we try to compare costs with finances. This slide shows the world. To the right, we see that a lot of money goes to the east of Asia. it's important to have bilateral funds and multilateral funds. Because we see that a lot of money goes to the Asia. There are more details I will give you later. The website where you can download this report, and we'll see later information related to this site. More thing costs. A quite important document made by drafted by the World Bank estimated the expenses between 70 and 100 billions spent for the period 2010-2050. Work that did, UN Environment with our help estimated this cost in more higher values seen on the table. We divided this by the cost in 2000 and 2010, 30 and 2050. Why? Due to two reasons. First is that uncertainty. There are a lot of parameters that we need to know, that we should know, to know the cost, or we do know them. So this will relate to adaptation to climate change, and this makes this task harder. The more we reflect uncertainty, the greater we will have regarding costs. So it's not always the case, but if you read the report, we will see it. The wider the range of costs. Other thing is that regarding definitions, what is included, what is not included, what you include the most goes to the bigger the estimations of the cost. And other thing that is quite important, and sometimes we don't mention enough, are the parameters used to evaluate cost. I won't go into too much detail, but the economic efficiency gives us lower costs compared to the ones in the analytic paradigms. What else can I tell you? Conclusion, we don't know much regarding the cost. We know very little too about the cost of adaptation and climate change as well as the finances available. You have seen this slide where there is not much information. That is actually what we know. Even though despite the information gaps, even the studies that we have, we believe that even when we fulfill the information, we believe that based on the evidence that we have, the gap exists, and it is of a great magnitude. And one recommendation that would give, it's a good thing to do global meetings. It's great, but what is critical is to do studies at the local level, but because you can go into detail. The suppose are simplified, the ranges are smaller, and we can have shorter ranges. If you want to do a study, I don't know, regarding rice farms, what does rice mean, cultivation in different areas, there we will have to do the report and have more reliable results in order to generate more reliable numbers. So I think it's a mechanism to planify better and to act better. The analysis is just one mechanism for actions to be more effective. That is the website. This website where you can download the report. And two more words before finishing regarding private sector. It's a quite big compromise. We don't know it. As I showed you the slide, we just don't know. We just don't know how much money from the private sector goes to this type of mitigation adaptation. Let's see a person that is at her house, and works to get more isolation in the case of floods, rain, etc. that, that is financing the private sector. We can consider that as our financing from private sector, but if the person is inside his home, two things, because I think that I am running out of time. Two things. We were looking at this center I worked for. Two things. Actions that are done by non-governmental organizations, the private sector, and, I don't know, universities. Any combination that does not include the public sector, but not freed by the public sector. We looked at these actions led by the non-public sector, and we saw that there's a little where the private sector is present, and what there is to power money, and what we saw was microfinances. There it works for specific cases. Sometimes it works for other topics, but we haven't found the evidence. We found interesting things, local things, in relatively poor zones. That is where it works, and there is additional money, meaning that in this non-state actuary, that people generate additional money that wouldn't exist. So that is something that we came out with. And other things besides microfinances, there's not a lot. We are sure of that. Last point that I wanted to highlight at the end is things that we were doing in OCDE countries, because I think they believe they established a trend. We'll talk about the UK. UK does two things: request different sectors considered as crucial for the functioning of the country. What does that mean? Nuclear plans, Ministry of Agriculture, also Ministry of Transportation. Everybody that has a direct responsibility for the country to improve every day, they were requested to elaborate, to draft documents for the sector. What does the climate change mean, or what can they do regarding climate change? And the other thing done by the British government is put clear to other entities, public entities, not all of them, that there won't be a budget to finance adaptation climate change. There is no bag of money in the Office of Prime Minister to finance all this, because I mentioned the sectors have reported what they require, and that have to come from their own budgets. Why is that interested? Because since it wouldn't be other way, with many biases, it wouldn't be other way, these people, what they say is that they are going to change their rates, person selling electricity, in order to incorporate the costs that will be generated by this. There's a brief example. I'll just only say, for example, to supply water, somebody to supply water, and California said that agency has to do the same thing, requesting the UK to show that they have everything under control, to show that they have a plan that is quite advanced as the science allows, and to explain how he or she is going to do it, and to explain the taxpayer what would be the increase of the amount, decrease of the rate amount, in order to face these challenges. I'm sorry, I think I talked too much, but I think regarding these topics we don't know that much, and what we are seeing is this regarding these topics of microfinances. But on the state level, what the governments are doing. And I think this is going to be outsourced to the service providers. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, I'll be here at your service. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel, for this such an interesting presentation and for sharing with us. Thank you for sharing with us the results of this important report. Even though adaptation is gathering more attention at the national global level, we can see a visible gap in order to satisfy the needs. But as you mentioned, microfinances work, so we need to explore even more this initiative. With that, it is a pleasure to give the floor our next speaker, Mauricio Osorio Sanchez, General Manager of Crescamos from Colombia. And he's going to share with us his experience on this experience to getting involved to microfinance in order to support this in Colombia. I see there are many questions for the new participants in the webinar. Just to share that at the end of the presentation we will have a question and answer session. So please, if you could just write your questions and who are your questions for. Thank you very much. Welcome, Mauricio. Good morning. Can you hear me well? Can you write to me if you hear me well? Can you write it on the chat? Thank you. I would like to start because I've seen many questions regarding the financing of ways on an involvement of private sector, and this type of initiatives could be viable and sustainable. And first, I would like to thank Jacinto the invitation that she shared with us. I would like to tell you that we have over 10 years we've been helping the sector for a period of over 10 years, and I would like to start by saying that in this case we changed the paradigm, and we did so regarding the policy, because the public policy, or in a way the public policy and institutions that we worked with for so many years, we had a paradigm regarding the access to credit to the small farm producer, and the access paradigm has an implication, and it looks to protect the institution or to facilitate to have more access. So most of the encouragement is to create livestock funds in order to give more facilities for financing to get it to the farming sector, but it's not directed to the producer. And that is one of the first change of paradigms, is that access to that financing has to be changed by a new paradigm of productive financing, of purpose financing. And when we want to do a productive and purpose financing, we need to recognize, and I will talk only about the Colombian situation, we have to recognize that the small producers of Colombia, they are highly vulnerable to climate change. You can have a lot of methods for an institution to finance, but if the source of payment, if the small producer, the one working on the field, is highly vulnerable to climate change, then the risk, the productive activity, is hardly financeable, because nobody that is in the private sector do business in order to lose money. So we understood that, and that is why I think to PNUD the MIBA project and Germany, because we understood that if we really want to generate a field or an agriculture that needs to be productive and sustainable, we have to re-understand that our paradigm is how we can do a productive paradigm of purpose. And for that, one of the first elements that we understood in this graph, and I'm going to take a while on this graph, is that the main objective has to be that the producer has adaptive capacity, meaning that we have to protect our source of payment, and that source of payment is a small producer. And that adaptation capacity requires not only financing, but it also requires a lot of consciousness and to raise awareness regarding the climate change, what it represents towards the old way that the people produce food in the sector. But it is also related to the support technical assistance for this introduction in order to be more productive, more adaptable to climate change. So when we understand that, understand that what we can do in the farming sector, we are not talking about to reconfigure an institution as an entity dedicated to giving loans or to giving out financing. We have to focus on how that small farming producer will be a producer adapted, that would be allowed to have some access, some sort of stability, to create some production in a sustainable way, without having to think about the rains. If there's too much rain, he or she will lose the crops, or a flood, or freezing temperatures. So those are things that we cannot allow the producer to think like that. And every time he or she works, he plans to think about all these things, but this is a risk started by each seeding process. So we focus on two things. One is the productive process, and we understand the productive process from the small producer, and to the commercial process that takes him to the market, how the market demands, and what is the frequency demanded. And what we understand is that the small producer not only has some climate risks, but also natural risk, natural sanitary risk, financial risk, and risk of market, mainly focused on company. And that one solution for this type of things, this type of activities, not only can be financed by the agriculture, but it have to go hand in hand with crops insurance, incentives for rural capitalization in order to implement many of the projects, and has to come with some insurances that will protect him or her, his or her income, in order to take the farming activity in this country wouldn't be just leave to luck, but instead it will be predictable. That, for example, me, I will know how much I'm going to produce and what is the amount I'm going to get. So from there, we thought that we build a value proposition, meaning that we have to finance in order to increase the productivity. What are the paradigms that they have around the financing in the first place? They need a credit that is easy, fast, that would allow him or her to pay the credit with the fruit of their harvesting. Because in this financing, we were taking the credits had to be paid monthly or every 6 months, etc. But we have to adapt. A second part is that it has to allow the producer to be part of the network that would allow him or her to connect to the world, to the market. We have specific cases. For example, there is a case of the Yame production, which is a great idea, but he was not adapted. So we went with her, we tried to work with him so he can know the money required to increase the agricultural production. So he knows the adaptation. He feels safe, but he's not working the land. We found one of the reasons, not the only reason, one of the reasons had to do with the fact that there's a great amount of consumers of farming sector, and when we ask we call farming producers why they're not able to access the credit, because he is afraid of losing the land, because that is the only asset that he or she has. So risking a harvest with our own resources is one thing, but risking a harvest with financing options is another thing, because if I cannot produce, I have the financial institution, and it and complicates things. So we are centering this new paradigm in that the producer, we had to take him for him to see himself in a farm productive unity more sustainable, so he can be adaptable, so he can be allowed to be adaptable to climate change. And thanks to the project what we developed, not only is the financing that has to do with financing that adapts to the cash flow of the producer and understands how the producer produces, but we are also promoting decisively and massively the implementations of adaptation measures within the production unity of the client that would allow this client to be adapted, to be sustainable within the climate change. Jacinto already mentioned some of the topics that we work with the producers, because not in all areas same production means are applied. Within the project we apply different measures, and we segment and we apply different measures to different areas. But some of the measures that we have are the solar hydroponics, biodigesters, family doors, apiculture, soil the heat reducers, compost management, the terrace system that in some regions for us is quite important for us to increase the areas, water reservoirs, watering systems, and those are just some of the ideas that we're working with. So when us as a financial institution, we are promoting this development of measures that the producer will be more sustainable, and we re-understood that the farming financing and the tech financing could be sustainable because the client will have we always give that as a calculation of the internal return rate and the amount of the money invested. And what we did was, if you produce organic compost with the material from your animals, you have to see how much you can purchase, and you can replace that material. You have to see the improvement in terms of production of quality. If you purchase another equipment, in terms of ballistic and speed and benefit speed, and the same thing goes for cacao. If you are promoting a watering system, the calculation that we did for the producer is how can you increase the productivity, what is the frequency to deliver fruit of quality, how can you adapt to summertime, how can you take advantage of the better prices when maybe there are some shortage in producers that have, pigs, for example. We are not showing just how to produce a biodigester and gas for the farm, but we are showing how a normativity that increases, which is the management of the residues of the pigs. That is a new paradigm, and that is what we're taking to the Colombian field for the producer to understand. in order to reestablish a more long-term relationship regarding the farming finance and to establish a farming production with less volatility. What are those measures that how are we doing them? In a way, in each region, as I mentioned, each region we have to choose what are the climatic events that most affect, not in all regions, especially in a country like Colombia with so many microclimates, not in all regions all same adverse events happened. In some regions, droughts are one of the most important things. In that measure, what we do is to be able to have that implication when promoting measures. We select measures most adapted to product. We select allied because I saw in the chat some questions regarding mentoring. We understand that, but the training and the delivery of the solutions is done through ally network because we cannot go beyond our mission, which is a financial mission and of financial services. What we did was to establish a network of allies that in a way are taught to producers in a typical case with SINA, where SINA we involved a matter within the training program called Plant Progression. We did that with Jacinto Help, and we included a showing center within the production units of the SENA for to have pilots or prototypes for the adaptation process. Some adaptation measures are allowed to be done by the producer. He only needs some training, and in other case there is a need for a provider in order to provide the measure as for the watering system, the solar dryers. So we need a network of allies, and that is great for the ally because the sales could be increased for the ally because the producer could say that I don't have the money to do that, but I finance enough from Cascados in order to update that. We did what I mentioned before, the technical documents, where we show the producer that he himself can, with the same producer, the measure will increase the productivity, the measure is paid alone, and obviously the intervened zone we are doing training and constant training because we need to know the producer is quite constant. One question made by Arturo, of course this is private 100%. We don't have other subsidies. The project as such, the idea that started over 4 years ago, it was financed by the Ministry of Environment, and we did that by the PNUMA. But the resources that we deliver to the producer are private resources. We pay to the financiers, and the client just pay us. And Arturo mentioned that because we wanted for this not to be associated with the subsidies. We have a not so good experiences. For example, in this semester in Colombia, we were not able to sell agricultural insurance. Why? Because the institution of the states provided. So when you want to create a culture, a new paradigm of financiation, then we cannot depend on subsidies. What are some of the measures? Let's say that this on the slide, some of the measures as I mentioned in the case of apiculture, these are some sort of documents that are commercial. Force have, they use them to explain the producer how this measurement, how this helps them, what is needed to be implemented. So you will have the slides, and you will skip this. These are real pictures from the first farms, which is a demonstrative farm that we did here in Colombia. It's a biodivisor. We explain what is it, how can he pay that, etc. This is a solar dryer. That is the example of solar dryer in this farm. For example, what we did as a marketing technique is to take the producer and a lot of family to this farm, so that it could be like a showroom. We talk about consciousness, we talk about measures, and we tell them, if you want to do a measure, if you want to implement that in your farm, you have to do this. We also leverage on producers that they already have adaptation measures, and they, in the community, they promote that this measure could be a financeable measure for this type of production, and then many people understand the benefits. These are other measures that allows to have some products where the producer can feed himself. And depending on the infrastructure, in this case, this infrastructure can also generate some income without having great extension, because one of the key elements, and I see some elements, some questions in the chats. In this case, we are talking about small producers. 95% are less of 5 hectares, so we are seeing how with those less than 5 hectares he can be a successful producer. That is another example, and these pictures are real pictures of the measures that we have and how we market them, and this is quite profitable, and this is just quite profitable, and the producer can just pay without problems. We have another program here with the irrigation system. Some people just are not used to have this system because they're based on rains. So what we tell them is, let's get you an irrigation system so you cannot depend from the rain. So that way you will be able to pay your credit. This is a water reservoir. So we are teaching producers to calculate the amount of water they need for their production. People, they just do not know, and they actually do not know how much water they will need in order to water the plants. So we teach them this type of things. And these are some of the measures that we were able to do. We have a pie chart of the measures most used by the people and how people are using this. And finally, I wanted to share with you some examples. If you see they are quite basic examples, quite small producers. They're not great producers things or great infrastructures. One of the paradigms that we had here is adaptation measures based on ecosystem. So the measure is not plus. Let me change. Is another example from Miguel Angel Pinzon. Examples of how he implemented this. Another example of made in Rincon Prompero. It's a greenhouse. Look at the pictures. Everything that person did. He has 7 years as customer, and each credit was to implement additional measure. We have irrigation system, ecological control with traps, greenhouse, etc. And that way we can accomplish the producers to be more sustainable and allow a more agriculture that could create more income and to be better. That is the majority, that is what we want for them. Thank you very much. I don't know, Lily, if you have the floor. Thank you very much, Mauricio, for the experience in Colombia. There are a lot of comments, quite interesting. We had quite links among participants. I would like to open the question and answer session. We received some questions already, and I have them here, documented here. I would like to start with two questions for Daniel, because right now in Denmark it's afternoon. There are two questions for Daniel. You didn't talk about microclimate insurance. Can that be also private? I think it was already answered. How can you define adaptation investment? I will give the floor to Daniel so he can share with us his answer. Yes, just quickly because I have to leave quite soon. How can we define this? It's just we decide not to complicate things and manage the definition that called by the OCDE is called real markers. I can share on the chat the definition if you are interested. These people were just working, gathering information. And they normally do this among the years, and they have improved the markers, and they have doing this. So the real markers, they have the real definition as to what is real markers or not. That is the definition that we use. In a moment, I will share the link with you in the chat so you can take a look at it. Thank you very much, Daniel. Thank you for your excellent presentation. And we will share also the contacts of contact information of all speakers if there are any other questions for Daniel. Now I'm going to start with several other questions. We received other questions for Jacinto. So one question is from Manuel Antonio from El Salvador. If there are lessons learned related to agroclimatic insurance and risks after disaster for small producers for scenarios of emergency for climate variation. Another question would be, somebody made the calculations needed for the users and beneficiaries and how could be diluted in institution and general expenses. So I think you should direct the finance back to the beneficiaries. So there's two questions for Jacinto. And then thank you very much, Daniel, for your presentation for this panorama on the financing. Thank you very much. Jacinto, you have the floor. There's a small audio problem with Jacinto. We try to solve it and we go with Mauricio. And then we can give the floor again to Jacinto. Just a moment. Some of the questions were already answered by Mauricio. So there's a question from Edgar Castellanos. How can we increase the production under the self-sustainable production? How to guarantee the line of the organization of the product? One more question. Next questions come from Yuri in Peru. Most vulnerable agricultures are located in the highlands. The average of the parcel is 0.2 acres. Do you think you can apply this type of financing mechanism? There's another question from Berta Garcia. She says that the context shared by Mauricio in Colombia is a quite similar context to the Latin American region, and specifically in Peru. So at the moment we work a lot with productive chains, crops like cacao, banana, and cacao and banana. What are the measures that we can have there, and how can we strengthen that and adapt that to insurance? Question from Alexis: how a farmer of less than 2 hectares access this options? There are several questions related to this same topic. Give the floor to Mauricio. I would like to tell you some stories of cacao. There's a product of Latin America that we actually farm with in all Latin America. We found a region where for us to understand how the producer produces, what is the to income group flow, the costs and expenses, we have to collect a lot of information of the region. We will intervene. In that intervention, what we identify is producers with a high productivity, producers with a low productivity, and then we understand the cultural activities of each producers. That showed us that just with the fact of having group meetings and showing the producers, all producers, the most productive producers, what are the cultural activities, and the opposite, with that we accomplished and we raised awareness on the productivity. Another thing has to do with credit access. It has to be quick and easy. It cannot take a lot of time. Most of our credits, farming credits, from the request to the delivery, we talk about 3 days, and that guarantees that many of the works like fertilization are done on time, and that fertilization tasks allow the producers to increase productivity. Now, as for commercialization, well, what do? It's another topic, different topic. We are trying to find a link. So there is a need, and we support that not only some productive cases and societies of producers so they can help in the production. Other questions are producers of 0.2 hectares or small credit loans are $200. So a producer with 200 to 0.2 hectares are the most, it should be the most adapted because he is the most vulnerable because he cannot do other diversification of products. In Colombia we have similar cases. They have a quarter of hectare and with that they are tremendously productive and they are our clients and they can access to productive financing. And third question has to do with environmental insurance. We have a parallel project and we finish a productivity study and we need to develop this product to Colombia. In Colombia last year, less than 3% of the cropped area was insured. And there was a great amount of and the thing is, we had a presentation there and regarding harvest insurance and why we did that because we didn't have a mutual society because insurance has to be massive, popular and paid. For example, we have 7 million hectares and only 3% have access to agricultural insurance and that does not allow this type of insurance for the insurance company to give some income. So we are trying to developing, we commercialize harvesting insurance and we are developing a project with climatic insurance fund in order to develop an insurance for Mexico that we believe is one of the solutions that we have to develop for insurance in Colombia to be a massive insurance so we can have a lot of insurance companies and several producers. The last question that people made is how a small farmer of less than 2 hectares can access. We didn't only have a network of offices, we have 72 offices in our regions, but we also had a group of people that work with us and that visit each producer at their houses. Because some of the producers say that if they have less than 2 hectares, they didn't have a lot of credit experience, they exclude themselves. So we visit them, we do groups, we do campaigns of commercialization and campaigns of promotion. We invite them regardless of the size of the farms. So they can watch the experience of other producers and share their experiences. And so we ease the access. But as a final thought, the new financing paradigm cannot be the access to credit. The new paradigm has to be the production and sustainability. It's not worth it to finance producers when they lose the crops and they cannot pay the credit and so the door is closed for the financial department. No, we need a financing that would allow the producer to pay the credit, to generate increases and to increase the patrimony. And we will find that in the measures that our focus of attention is not only to obtain credits but to help small producers and the sector to be more productive and sustainable, and that has to do the paradigm. And in that sense, we have to reconfigure whether Crescamos or other institutions that would like to access to help the sectors and help the necessary alliances for the majority of this are aligned in this new paradigm where we are looking to the producer and the source of payment is the one adapted, sustainable, and can have a productivity that will allow to pay the credit and generate richness, wealth, and that is what we need. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mauricio. While we are verifying the consensus audio, I would like to continue with some more questions that we received. Especially the debate, just a minute. One question from Gabriela. I would like to know what is the interest rate that you have for the microcredits? What is the time? How long of investment it took you to create the prototypes of the farms according to macro weathers and potentials of productions? The other question comes from Manuel Antonio Lopez. If you talk about credits given for the producers that can share, what can you share with us in relation to the interest rate and the credit policy and how the I'm sorry, this is a very complicated question that had to do with the rent and mortgage credits and everything. Another question that we have is by Ana Maria. What is the role of the academia and the research centers in those types of initiatives? And then one more question, just a minute. Do you have experiences with towns, urban settlements? Those are questions for Mauricio. Thank you very much, Mauricio. Thank you very much for the questions. Regarding the first question on the interest rates, and I mentioned you something. I believe our interest rates in microcredits in Colombia are quite high. Sadly, today we do not accomplish some scales of financing the important that we don't have a financing of the coast that decrease the cost. Therefore, the interest rates of microcredits are interest rates at average in Colombia are 44%. To show the producer that increase a measure with that rate could generate wealth, it is a quite difficult work. I believe and I'm hopeful that we are building this, that in the long term we have to be capable of reducing the interest rates, because we believe not only that the client is not able not to earn money, but the person could increase the capacity of investment. But if the repayment capacity is good, but if the interest rate the investment rate is low, if the interest rate is reduced, the value of the investment will be greater, and so we will have a better portfolio, more efficiency, better public sector. But I have to recognize that now interest rates are not the lowest compared with the concurrency. We are below our concurrency or competition. The morality of payments, we made a follow-up from the start of this project 4 years ago. In production, this project has around 3 years. And what did we find? They pay better. The farming client that implemented measures that had this financing structure than compared to the farming producer that is regularly financed. This product, we don't have it at the national level. We just have it in some sectors where we intervene because in order to develop this financial sector, we have to collect a lot of data, previous data, and that was not possible at the national level. But I can tell you that when the producer understands this, we become counselors of the progress. We make an alliance with the producer has a better morality of payment. He understands that the credit was something that was supported to make it more sustainable. As for the academia and the research center, which is the third question, I am a fanatic of taking a look at documents produced by the research centers, but there's a distance between the research center production as versus what the producer understands and knows. There's a huge gap. And to give an idea, in terms of coffee in Colombia, is the better cultivation in this country is that a research produced in a research center of coffee, it takes almost 4 years to arrive to a producer. So the important role is to work articulately with institutions like ours, with SENA, for that information, that big knowledge, important knowledge, saved in the research centers, arrives to the agricultural producer. Thanks to today's technology, we'll have more technologies that will allow us to accelerate the knowledge, so the knowledge can be with the producer. As for the Towns experience, I have to recognize that I don't know, because Camus is a company that has over 100,000 clients, and I do not know the whole sounds or the stories that we have. It is possible that we have experiences with Eco Towns, but I don't know them, and I will take the task. I will do it homework so we can document those experiences also. Thank you very much, Lily. Thank you very much, Mauricio, for answering the questions. As I mentioned, we're going to share the emails of the speakers in order to give more collaboration opportunities, or if they are off questions. Thank you very much to the speakers, Jacinto Buenfil, Daniel Puig, and Mauricio Osorio, for your presentations, for giving us this insight regarding private sectors for the financing of adaptation, and with a more specific view on the rural development and adaptation based on ecosystem. Thank you very much for your questions and all the conversation in the chat. It was quite interesting to learn from your experiences, initiatives that you shared with us. The slides and the video will be shared with you through email, and you will have availability in the workshop of the Regatta program and the practice community PNAC. We shared with you some links where you can access more information regarding the MEVA project that was presented during the webinar. So with that, please go visit the other webinars on this topic. And I wish you a good day. Thank you very much.